Today on Vlast KZ. Maternity benefits. The government of Kazakhstan cuts maternity and child benefits. A man with a gun. The general made the choice to shoot without a signal. Police forces are allowed to shoot without warning if their lives are at stake. The third Mufti. The election of third Supreme Mufti, looking at the past and future of the country's spiritual administration. Muslims of Kazakhstan share their opinion on their new leader. Solo concerto. Piano master Yernar Nurtazin gave his solo grand performance in Almaty. Hello, I'm Asylbek Abdulov and you're watching Vlast KZ on KPLUS channel. The new terms for maternity benefit payments have caused quite a public outrage right after the amendments to the law on social security came into effect on February 17th. In Almaty, the situation went as far as reaching the stage of street protests. People rallied in front of the Department of Social Protection to express their discontent with the reduction of one-time benefits for pregnancy and childbirth. Others, including many fathers and members of various local communities, turned to social networks. People who chose active protest carried posters that read, "You can't give up, just give birth." In Kazakh history, this rally might as well go down as the uprising of young mothers with pregnant women and activists coming up with a clever rally chant. Forget about dirty politics, we have some other stuff to think about, but the minister who's making policies, return the benefits or get the hell out. According to the constitution, Kazakhstan is foremost a social state, although the clearly anti-popular and often the reactionary policies of the government and their ruling party Nur Otan tells just the opposite. The new legal initiative of the authorities comes in contradiction with the public interest. Moreover, it poses a threat to the social stability. The Interior Ministry proposes to grant the police the right to open fire without as much as giving a warning. This provision is a part of the bill on the internal affairs of the Republic of Kazakhstan, which was presented recently in the parliament. The proposal is consistent with the spirits and nature of the police state, which Kazakhstan has finally become during the Zhanozyan violence in December of 2011. The idea itself is a threat to the country's security, and it's a real concern that the envelope is pushed by none other but the Ministry of Interior. The scars left by Zhanozyan bloodshed are still fresh. Real scars, that is, left from the very real bullets of the riot police units shooting, killing and wounding peaceful protesters and torturing city residents in local detention centers afterwards. One quote from the great Soviet poet Vladimir Mayakovsky comes to mind in light of the new police initiatives. You believe the sun was tenderly patting the cheeks of the cafe. Now it's General Galifet advancing again to mow down the rebels.
A man in bright clothing was jumping down and there was a shot shortly after. I thought the man was drunk. I was really shocked as shooting a drunken man was too harsh. The witness to the crime is describing a victim, a man in bright clothes, Daurian Zimbayev, master of sports and close fighting, a member of the Patriots Party, a retired colonel, founder of Special Forces Unit. He was shot dead by a police officer, Murat Abirov, last July. Now Abirov is on the dock and his defending lawyer insists that he was trying to calm a drunken man who was attacking passers-by. Is there a warning shot? A warning shot? Well, if there's a real threat. Yes, I am asking about it. Is it legislated? Yes, it is. Law on Enforcement Services, Article 61. It says, don't move or I'll shoot. According to the official version, Azimbayev was armed with a knife. He resisted arrest and was shot in the head by police officer Abirov. However, the victim's relatives and friends doubt whether the police officer had legal authority to shoot to kill. If there is no time and opportunity to fire a warning shot, a law enforcement officer should be given the right to shoot to kill as he needs to defend himself and stop the actions of assaulters. This is Deputy Head of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, Yerlik Keninbayev, who presented a bill on internal affairs agencies in the lower house of parliament, whereby Kazakhstan's police officers should be authorized to shoot on sight. There are a few new features in the explanatory note to the document, including the provision allowing law enforcement officers to shoot to kill in some cases. A well-known human rights activist, Evgeny Zhovtis, is looking through the very bill, which seems quite perfect. However, once read, he realizes that not all provisions are of international standards. Our provision features a phrase, "and other serious consequences." Thus, a law enforcement officer is given the right to use firearms when not only his life but also the lives of others are in danger. In this sense, it is clear that this provision of the law has a broad interpretation of the international rules and principles that act towards the use of force by law enforcement officials. The oppositionist Bolat Abilov also says that this provision of the law can be freely interpreted by law enforcement officers. In fact, the free interpretation of this provision legally allows law enforcement officers to shoot ordinary people. Thus, if people are shot, neither the Minister of Internal Affairs, nor the President's Chief of Staff, or the President himself will be to blame. Retired Major General Amir Bektagusov is really shocked by the provision that can give law enforcement officers a possible privilege. Having worked in the interior troops for 30 years, he has always remembered an unwritten rule not to try to use weapons against civilians. Imagine a situation where 2 or 3 young guys passing by have looked very unfriendly at the police officer who may think that it is an assault and decided to use weapons against them, as the law does give him this authority. In April 2011, Kazakh citizen Kirill Denyakin fell victim to an alleged threat against an American police officer who shot him just for ignoring the officer's command to stop and doing a covert movement with his hands while moving towards the officer. The policeman that shot 11 bullets at the unarmed man was acquitted. Why has the issue about banning cars never been raised, even though a lot more people are murdered and injured in a car accident rather than being shot from a traumatic weapon? I'm not even mentioning a kitchen knife, one of the most commonly used murder weapons, which has never been prohibited, though. Supporters of the notion appeal to statistics whereby 800,000 offenses, including 0.1% with the use of traumatic weapons, have been committed in Kazakhstan in the last 5 years. Unfortunately, traumatic weapons classified as self-defense weapons are increasingly being used to attack. For example, no cases in which traumatic weapons were used for self-defense have been registered in Almaty so far. Supporters of the proposal to withdraw traumatic weapons from the population also appeal to numerous facts when these arms were used for an attack, as it happened in Shymkent, where one of the drivers shot another one trying to overtake his car. The driver of Vlast 2107 was taken to hospital as he was shot from a traumatic weapon by the driver of Nexia, who cut up the car and then fired several shots in its direction. However, avid proponents of traumatic weapons say that its banning definitely will not decrease the crime rate. International practice shows that the withdrawal of traumatic weapons definitely will not decrease the crime rate. If a person doesn't intend to kill, he will do it by any means, no matter what he will have as a weapon, a gun, a knife, or a tire iron. However, international practices show that the laws our legislators often refer to were discarded as a model to emulate a long time ago. For instance, American police officers will be soon trained in shooting new targets, images of pregnant women, children, and the elderly with weapons in their hands, which should help them work in an extraordinary situation.
Next on Vlast KZ. The third Mufti. The election of third Supreme Mufti, looking at the past and future of the country's spiritual administration. Muslims of Kazakhstan share their opinion on their new leader. Solo concerto. Piano master Yernar Nurtazin gave his solo grand performance in Almaty. Stay with us, Vlast KZ will return with more in a couple of minutes.
Главные события в Казахстане. Достоверные факты. Эксклюзивные комментарии. Читайте в Казахстане информационно-аналитический портал «Республика». Чтобы обойти блокировки, воспользуйтесь доменом respublikas.info. Вы окажетесь на так называемом прокси-портале. Специально разработанные канадскими специалистами по интернет-технологиям, прокси-порталы помогают пользователям получать информацию в тех странах, где блокируют интернет-ресурсы. В Китае, Иране, в Казахстане. Вы принимаете условия использования системы и попадаете на страницу информационно-аналитического портала «Республика». Материалы интернет-портала также доступны пользователям всемирной сети Facebook. facebook.com/respublika.kaz. Если вы хотите поделиться информацией, вам есть что рассказать, звоните в редакцию «Республики». Наши телефоны в Казахстане +7 727 273 92 95, в Москве +7 495 621 87 03.
Новости Казахстана на казахском языке смотрите в 21:00 и далее каждый нечетный час. Новости Казахстана на русском языке в 22:00 и далее каждый четный час. Новости Казахстана на английском языке смотрите в 16:30, 17:30, 18:30 и 19:30 со вторника по субботу. Время Астаны. Изготовление и размещение рекламы на канале KplusTV.
Дома очень часто.
Not too long ago, Gauhar Birkalieva, better known as Goga Ashkenazi, was a regular in London's newspapers' gossip columns. Enormous mansion, massive parties with stars, a friendship with Prince Andrew, and even an acquaintance with the Queen. That's why she gave birth to her son Adam, whose father, according to the British press, is Timur Kulibayev, another, so to speak, crown prince, only Kazakh. All that took place in London was reminiscent of a fairy tale about a Cinderella that found her prince, but this tale was obviously not to the liking of at least one reader in Akorda. That is when the fairy tale ended. The Sunday Times published an article claiming the Kazakh compression station princess was denied entry to the country last fall. This is how Goga describes the incident at the border herself. This is just a misunderstanding. I have a European passport and I can travel wherever I want. 2 years ago there was a problem with Panama passports, but now I talked with my lawyers who are deciding on whether to sue the newspaper. One of the article's authors, Mark Hollingworth, is an expert in the lives of former USSR nationals living in London. He published a book titled Londongrad in 2010 about the lives and adventures of Londongradians, but what happened remains a mystery to him as well.
And what we understand is that she has to negotiate every time she wants to come back to the UK. She has to negotiate authorities to be able to return to London.
Mark doesn't know the reason why Goga was detained at the border. The story is quite complicated and even mystical. The fact of the matter is that all wealthy former USSR nationals, as a rule, promised British citizenship in exchange for a commitment to invest their funds in the local economy.
So it's a very interesting, curious mystery as to why she can't come back to the UK.
For better or for worse, Goga's new Italian life has begun with her new toy, the Vionnet company, and even a new friend, Lapo Elkan. Lapo Elkan is a rich and famous heir to the Fiat Group's founding family. He is often nicknamed a style icon for a passion towards extravagant outfits. Lapo's extravagance is not only in his style, but his entire life as well. The Italian public has learned about its darker side in the fall of 2005. On October 11, 2005, Elkan is in the intensive care unit of the Turin hospital in a coma caused by an overdose. The Fiat heir was taken to the hospital by Donato Brocco, known in certain Italian circles as Patricia, a transvestite prostitute. It was in Brocco's apartment that Lapo was having his night out and ended up in a coma. He later became subject to another scandal. When the public learned, he paid €300 to avoid certain photographs from reaching the press. Goga's romance with the extravagant Lapo began in October of 2012. Around the same time, Goga began experiencing problems with Britain. But the paparazzi's golden hour has come. Goga's photographs with Lapo began appearing regularly in the press. They were pictured kissing on the deserted beach of Ibiza and Uruguay, walking down the streets in Milan and Paris, and attending various social parties. But observers couldn't shake the feeling that they're taking part in some sort of a theatrical staging. Journalists with cameras appeared in the right place at the right time, all too often. Not to mention the couple's hot love scenes, as if borrowed from a play staged at the Provincial Drama Club. The public's mistrust of the two socialites' big romance is first and foremost explained by the fact that the majority is convinced Lapo is gay. For better or worse, the rumors are out there. After all, his aristocratic upbringing obliges. That is exactly why it seems he is forced to spend time with socialites of the opposite sex. Goga also wins from the staging of the play. After the birth of the second son, which Goga made public to the world personally, it appears Agorda renewed its efforts to preserve what's left of the dignity of the national leader's family. All those familiar with the situation from the inside say, Timur Kulibayev lacks the courage and confidence to say no to all the court games and make a manly choice. Every time he needs to take that last step, he stops and starts a new play, even throwing the mother of his children into the arms of Milan's dandy. But sooner or later the secret will come out. Even now, Goga's romance with Lapo are becoming the subject of pranks and jokes on Italian TV. On one of the shows, Goga is played by a transvestite. Apparently, after the absurdity of the so-called romance became obvious to the world, the couple broke up. Now the only confused viewer is the one for whom this entire play was conceived. More protests last week. Almaty mothers outraged by a new decree were joined by Aktau workers who had problems of another kind. 150 painters, welders and assemblers of the company KpL Kazakhstan want salary rises, rightfully earned leaves and no more illegal dismissals. 50% of this shipbuilding company is owned by Kastroy Service Group. KpL Kazakhstan, according to its website, is involved in the construction of objects as part of the seashore project Egypt KCO Kashagan and was found specifically to support the operation of boats in the country's waters. Strategically, the company is located next to the Aktau port and appears to be proud of its exclusive access to the marine infrastructure for the implementation of the heavy industrial development program.
It is more profitable for them that way. If contracts are extended further to a year, it would require more training courses, more wages, and after the trial period is over, pay raises. When our guys were handing in their uniforms and equipment, some of them saw foreign citizens receiving it. In other words, taking our jobs. These are citizens of Bangladesh, China, Thailand, India, Malaysia, and other southeastern countries.
It is not the first strike of KpL Kazakhstan employees. In 2010, nearly 300 people already went on protest for their rights. Back then, the staff didn't like the enormous salary difference in what they were given compared to the foreigners holding similar job positions. That strike lasted for 5 days, although the promise of the Labor and Social Protection Minister to achieve fair working conditions has apparently fell through. It is still not clear whether protesters' efforts will pay off this time. Convicted Zhanozyan oilmen, political prisoners Aron Atabek, Vladimir Kozlov, Roza Tulitaeva and Vadim Kuramshin received packages from outside their prison walls last week. Activists of the alliance Terek and a well-known Kazakhstan's artist Kanat Ibragimov have collected some humanitarian aid for the high-profile inmates, supplying them with warm winter clothing, electric kettles, as well as notepads, pencils, paper and books. It all started with the idea of mailing books to convicts on New Year's. Then we decided to make it into a campaign that each one of us would write their wishes and greetings on the book to a particular person. There were plenty of volunteers to do that. Following the Christmas book campaign initiated by Almaty resident Gulnar Yesergepova, her friends and acquaintances, a civic initiative in support of political prisoners, started gaining its momentum. A page of the alliance called Terek, which stands for support, appeared in the social networks, raising money and supplies for the parcels to be mailed to prisons. Early this week, Terek mailed 20 parcels and packages to the prison, which holds convicts, oil workers of Zhanozyan and political prisoners, including Aron Atabek and Vladimir Kozlov. We clearly announced when initiating this campaign that we're looking at clothes made out of wool or modern fabrics like fleece, which retains heat. The prisoners are freezing as they don't have enough clothing or there is simply not enough time for them to dry out, so the mold appears. I believe the clothes we mail them come very handy.
Я думаю, что вот эти вещи, они очень им помогают.
Gulnar is a private entrepreneur. She used to be deeply involved with public life, dealing with women's rights, but she decided to leave for business. The return point for her was defined by one of the dissenters' rallies when police dispersed the crowd. That one, Gulnar and her friends in protest decided to hold weekly readings next to Abai's monument. A bit later, they came up with the idea of helping the political prisoners. We encourage artists and creative people to do their job with more of a civil agenda to it. That's when they bring great positive results for society. We encourage everyone to do whatever they deem necessary, not being afraid of being themselves and thinking the way they do. There is a wrong message out there preventing people from expressing their opinion and criticizing the government. The struggle against the dissenters in Kazakhstan, which is in full swing, causes people to shut down and lose their will to come up with initiatives or their works in public. Human rights activist Evgeny Zhovtyev personally experienced all the charms of prison regime. According to him, the prisons lack almost everything, including bed linen, utensils, medicines, food, and the society is obliged to correct the omissions of the state because imprisoned people are citizens of Kazakhstan. Unfortunately, the social consciousness hasn't reached that level of humanism just yet, he says. Imprisonment is the worst punishment. However, the freedom is not a value for our people, even behind the bars. People would say that criminals deserve to suffer in horrible conditions of the prison. I reiterate, the most terrible punishment is imprisonment by itself, and everything else just adds up. It's wrong to think that our main task is to ensure that the prisoners gets abused doing time in a bad place. Freedom is the word. Those of you who argue here, please give it a try. I know about it because I've stepped in their shoes. In fact, the people imprisoned for their beliefs is a whole different subject, said Zhovtyev. The concept of political prisoner isn't very defined and has no exact criteria in Kazakhstan. There are two concepts in the international practice. A prisoner of conscience is a person convicted for something that could be considered as political motives, for instance, anti-Soviet propaganda. And political prisoners, which are the individuals serving time for crimes possibly fabricated with the connivance of the judiciary system and investigators. Yet there are more concepts in modern Kazakhstan. I would add a third concept, which is the people who became involved in events without having anything to do with the political opposition. For instance, those who have been convicted over the trial of BT Bank and Mukhtar Jakishev's case. This is a perfect example when the people who are not interested in politics were caught in the middle of political struggle and unjustly suffered because they happened to be in the wrong place and a wrong time during the local political battles. The Polish member of Senate arrived to visit the prisoner Vladimir Kozlov. Along with the wife of the convicted opposition leader, they spent all previous week trying to arrange an appointment in the prison of the North Kazakhstan region. The leadership of the prison denied a visit to Kozlov for his wife and Polish officials. Instead, the local filming crew of Kazakhstan State TV channel waited for them outside prison. Polish visitors were either interviewed or interrogated. Is the purpose of your visit official or private? Are you really a member of the Polish Senate? Was this visit initiated by Kozlov's wife? Then whose initiative is it? We cannot understand. Well, okay then, thank you. Petropavlovsk journalists confirmed that the Department of Judicial System informed them about the arrival of the guests to the prisoner Kozlov. Following the unsuccessful attempts to meet with the opposition leader, the members of the Polish Senate returned to Astana. We deal with human rights and we are very much concerned. That's why we arrived here to meet with Kozlov, but unfortunately to no avail. However, we managed to meet with his wife and learned about political reasons, and we already formed our opinion on the situation in Kazakhstan. In fact, the colleagues of politician Vladimir Kozlov are going to express their opinion on the history of his arrest at the sessions of the Polish Senate and the European Parliament. They are also going to submit all the necessary paperwork to arrange a visit with the prisoner next time. I saw the prison cells, and it's not a place to write prison poetry behind a bad window. These dirty cells are full of unwashed people detained from the street. They have lice, syphilis, and tuberculosis is very common among them. Dirt and poor sanitation, every possible hygiene standards are violated, not to mention human rights. No clean linen, their feet are constantly freezing, there is no way for them to get a boiling hot water. Artist Kanat Ibragimov served 15 days in jail. He knows what it is to be behind bars. He was one of the first to respond to the idea of Terek Alliance to organize an art exhibition selling the paintings. The funds collected will be sent to political prisoners. Ibragimov appealed to the fellow artists through the social networks. Many of them don't even know much about politics, like people of art who live in a free country. They basically don't even watch TV and they don't care about what's going on. Perhaps some of them are even a bit too isolated, yet they have a clear conscience. They're ordinary, honest folks who donated their works. My message to some of them personally. Also, our countrymen who live in Europe are ready to donate their works to Political Prisoners Foundation. Terek Alliance is currently looking for premises to hold a charity exhibition. Artists Yasingali Sadırbayev and Raushan Dolgonbayeva, who live in Germany, already confirmed their attendance. All interested artists, visitors and potential buyers are welcome to participate. The new Supreme Mufti of Kazakhstan was elected last weekend. The 40-year-old Yerzhan Mayemyerov became the head of the Muslims' spiritual administration, replacing Absatar Derbisali, who previously held the position since 2000. Educated in an Egyptian religious school, the new Supreme Mufti is married and has 3 children. Previously, Mayemyerov served as an imam in the Semipalatinsk region. Members of Islamic clergy are heading to Nazarbayev Center. The extraordinary 7th National Council is holding early elections of Chief Mufti. Election of the new spiritual leader of Kazakhstan went very quick. The participants unanimously supported the candidacy of 40-year-old Yerzhan Mayemyerov, the imam from Semipalatinsk region. It's known that Mayemyerov received religious education in Egypt, where he graduated from the Sharia and Law Department of Al-Azhar Islamic University. My candidacy was unanimously supported during an extraordinary national council. From now on, I will put all efforts for development of our country. I will advocate for the Islam that was practiced by our ancestors. As later revealed, the National Council was initiated by Absatar Haji Derbisali, who decided to announce his retirement. Derbisali was heading Spiritual Directorate of the Muslims of Kazakhstan for the last 13 years. According to him, he is pleased with the fruitful work he accomplished. University of Islamic Culture Nur Mubarak, the Institution of Islam in Almaty, and 9 new madrasas in the region were established on his watch. I am grateful to Allah for having an opportunity to work as Mufti in such a great country, headed by President Nursultan Nazarbayev. After all, the whole world knows our president. It makes me happy. We have a new young Mufti and people of Kazakhstan shall support him. In turn, I'll pray for him. Many analysts believe that resignation of Absatar Haji is directly associated with last year's terrorist attack. The official Islamic clergy loses control over its flock. Believers leave for alternative religions that come from abroad, whereas Mufti Derbisali is too weak to change the situation. According to Arabist Muhit Hasanbay, new Mufti is unlikely to improve the situation around the spiritual authority. Officially, the religion is separated from the state, but in reality it is not. During elections for Supreme Mufti, the imams from regions paid much attention to the Agency for Religious Affairs. Ideally, Absatar's resignation had to be first approved by National Council. The new Mufti had to be elected, but he was simply assigned instead. Marchenko should be elected because he has a good beard. Head of the Muslims Union Murat Telebekov doesn't think that new Mufti deserves his position. According to him, the authorities are making a big mistake by betting on Yerzhan Mayemyerov. We haven't heard of him as a theologian, as a preacher, or as a speaker. Why would authorities need a man with no authority? Will he be able to solve difficult issues without a due experience, recognition, appearance and charisma? New Mufti seems to be a dark horse for the head of the Haji Association of Kazakhstan. However, Bakatbay Aynabek is very cautious in his estimate. According to him, the fact that philologist Absatar Derbisali, who in his opinion had nothing to do with Islam, finally left office is the best news. Aynabek is convinced that Derbisali is the one to blame for weakening of Spiritual Directorate of Muslims of Kazakhstan. There is only one Islam in Kazakhstan and plenty of religious associations. Each of them has their own statutes. The new Mufti now has to assemble a new team of people pure as religion itself. After all, the Spiritual Directorate of Muslims of Kazakhstan became a very profitable business lately. Each year they sell 4,000 Hajj seats to citizens of other countries, allowing only 1,000 of Kazakhstan citizens to visit the holy places. British experts predicted that in 2013 Kazakhstan will fall into the group of countries with a high risk of terrorist threat. This was discussed in Astana this week at the meeting on national security. Local experts believe that ineffectiveness of anti-terrorism has to do with the lack of professionalism of law enforcement agencies, passivity of civil society and corruption in the government. The foreign analysts insist that a large number of people charged with religious extremism in Kazakhstan were convicted illegally. Last year, 105 people were charged with terrorism. If it was up to me, then I would have held them criminally liable for writing captions like "Long live the Caliphate." I would have tried them for terrorism and extremism and for violation of constitution. Therefore, it must be made clear that the measures taken shall not be directed against what we call religious extremism. Because if you are putting me on a trial for my religious beliefs, it is called limiting my human rights. This week, the court in Aktobe found 17-year-old Salamat Akhmetov and 18-year-olds Nursultan Tenizbayev and Arslan Zhakayev guilty of terrorism propaganda. Two of them received 5 years in prison, while the minor Akhmetov was sentenced for 3 years. According to investigators, young men planned to blow up the liquor plant that produced the vodka called Allah. However, the parents insist that their children were framed. I'll go around all the authorities in Astana. I will set myself on fire if I have to. The mother will do anything for her child. I'll tear my heart out if I have to. He's only 17 years old and he doesn't like the streets. There's no justice in Aktobe region. We're scared to walk on the streets and we're afraid of police too, because they could easily frame us by slipping something in our pockets. My child was convicted for a random conversation with Askat Saken, who works for the National Security Committee. Most likely, this isn't the last trial on terrorism. According to the National Security Committee, there are currently 24 radical Salafi communities of about 500 people in Kazakhstan. The Spiritual Directorate of Muslims has lots to think about.
В Алматы на неделе прошел сольный концерт лучшего на сегодня пианиста страны Ернара Нуртазина.
Last week, Almaty hosted a solo concert of Yernar Nurtazin, considered the best contemporary piano player in Kazakhstan. The 25-year-old master became famous after winning international competitions while still studying at the Kurmangazi Conservatory. Yernar's triumph came during his performance with the legendary orchestra Moscow Virtuosi at the Alexander Hall of the Grand Kremlin Palace. The orchestra's maestro Vladimir Spivakov said afterwards that Yernar proved himself an excellent partner, all only after 3 prior rehearsals. According to music critics, the pianist has a reputation as a Joseph Haydn connoisseur, so that vital performance with Spivakov's orchestra makes even more sense after all. Nurtazin's repertoire includes virtually all sonatas and concerts of the composer and even has his own interpretation of the works.
Это была программа «Власть KZ».
This was Vlast KZ on KPLUS channel. Join us next Monday for more trends highlights and a look into personalities of the week. Goodbye.
До свидания.